What's going on, everybody? I am back. Welcome back to the Pack-A-Day podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman, today. Before I get started, a huge thank you to Jacob Westendorf and Dan Kotnick for hosting these past, 5-6 days while I've been out, specifically Jacob for multiple days. Also, kudos to Ross Uglum and Jake Morley and Paul Brettel for helping out as well. It was really great to recharge the batteries a little bit before draft season starts, and we jump into all of that, but it feels so good to be back. There's no place I would rather be right now than recording this episode here on YouTube and talking to you guys about the Packers again. I am jazzed up and excited. I want to talk about speed at wide receiver because Matt LaFleur was very clear that he feels they need a little bit more speed in that room with MVS gone. But before we get to the main event today, I want to spend just a smidge of time on the new NFL overtime rules because while I am overall excited that I believe and wholeheartedly believe that this is an improvement over the previous system where you just had the sudden death and both teams didn't get the opportunity, I still feel like it's imperfect. And I still feel like there's going to be the opportunity for maybe, you could get a third possession, whatever, right? Like, I don't care about that. I think it's better. But what I will say is, like, you do get into some weird, situations and circumstances with getting the ball in overtime, like who gets it first? What if they end up, taking like an 11 or 12 minute drive? Like, how much time does the other team get at the end of it? And I know these are really rare scenarios, but I don't know. I don't like that in a playoff scenario. Like, let's just not time it then in that situation, right? Like, if it's in the playoffs, first team gets the ball, second team gets the ball, and then if it's still tied after that, the next team gets the ball and it moves to sudden death. Like, why are you even timing anything? You can't end in a tie in overtime anyway. So just get right. And I get, like, at a certain point you may switch field, whatever. Like, in overtime in playoffs, just take the clock out of the equation in this situation. Just give the first team the ball, the second team the ball, and then if it goes on, you go to sudden death. And again, time doesn't matter in that situation. I think there's a couple things they're going to have to clarify there. More importantly, I hate any time where things get different in the playoffs than they are in the regular season. Like, your game, you should strive for your game to be perfect. You should strive for it to be the best version of itself. And if it's the best version of itself, it should be that way in the regular season and in the postseason. And that's not the case right now. You have different overtime rules in the regular season than you do in the postseason. I'm not going to go on a huge overtime diatribe here because I ultimately believe that they've improved it by giving both teams a chance at the ball. Whatever happens after that, I don't care. I do think that you have an interesting scenario. Would you rather be the team that gets the ball first? Because then if if you're both tied after both teams score, then you could get the ball back and now it's sudden death. Or would you rather have it second, knowing what the first team did first? So if they score, 3, 6, 7 points, whatever, 8 points, now you have the ball second and know exactly what you need. Like, there's going to be some interesting strategy there. So I'm excited about that. I still believe that the best of all worlds is that get rid of the coin flip, move back to sudden death, both in regular season and postseason, and whoever is the home team gets the choice if they want the ball or not. Takes all of the randomness out of the equation. It gives the home team another advantage of being the home team. And to me, then it's real, right? And I don't care at that point in overtime if you didn't get the opportunity to get the ball. You knew that the home team was going to have the advantage and that they were going to get the ball. And if, as the away team, the burden is on you to win the game in regulation if you want to make it fair and make sure that it doesn't go to overtime where the home team is going to get the ball first. And you better be more aggressive in regulation then to make sure it doesn't get to overtime where you could have a situation where you don't even touch the ball and you could lose. So that's where I'm at with it, but I like the improvement. I think it's better. Just wish it was consistent in regular season and postseason. I think there were better options out there, but I love the fact that both teams get the opportunity to touch the ball no matter what in the playoffs, and I believe that is, again, an improvement overall from what it was previously. But enough about playoff NFL overtime. We have a lot of other things to discuss from a Packers standpoint. most importantly, and again, our main topic for today is going to be speed at the wide receiver position. And I know while I was out, this has, of course, been a huge topic of conversation. If you missed the quote from Matt LaFleur at the NFL owners meetings, he said, quote, "Certainly if you look at our roster right now, we definitely need to get some speed in that room. We need a legit guy that can take the top off of the coverage. We lost a guy that was pretty good at doing that," of course, referencing Marquise Goodwin, who signed with the Kansas City Chiefs. So, what exactly did they lose in MVS? I think before we look at potential solutions or options, we have to look at what they lost. Because the idea of MVS is pretty freaking great. And I've gone on record as saying, and I wholeheartedly believe that a lot of times you can throw MVS's stats out the window. His presence on the field mattered. His ability to stretch defenses mattered. Even if he wasn't the one getting the ball, even if he wasn't the one getting the explosive plays, the ability that he had to draw coverage and open things underneath mattered. So, yes, his stats at times would come and go, but his difference on the field was important. Also, he had great size, great speed, but maybe as important is he was a really great blocker. And as I've talked about in the past and others have talked about as well, it's not just that he was a fast, quick receiver. I think Justice Mosqueda was the one who put this best, but it's not just that he was a fast downfield threat. It was that he was a fast downfield threat that could actually be a legitimate blocker on the outside for all those wide receiver screens, for the run plays, etc. You know, take DeSean Jackson, right? DeSean Jackson, Brandon Cooks, some of the guys that we'll discuss today, they're great on the outside as potential deep threats, guys that have the legit speed to stretch a defense. But if you want to do all that other Matt LaFleur stuff while they're out there, you better not run their way. You better not throw a wide receiver screen to somebody else with them blocking in that situation, because they're not going to get the job done. They don't have the bulk, the size, or just the effort to block and hold up in those situations. So MVS brought a lot to the table despite maybe lacking some of the top end statistics. Now, what Green Bay would love would be to have somebody that was able to do what MVS did in 2020. He had 6 catches over 40 yards in 2020. That is difference-making potential. He led the league in 2020 with 6 plus 40 yarders. He had 3 plus 40 yarders in 2021. So 9 over the past 2 seasons. Again, 6 would have, leads the league in 2020. So to give you an idea, that's the ideal. That ability to stretch the field, again, gives defenses pause and cause for concern and makes them pay a bit more attention. However, I do want you to remember a couple things about MVS here. First of all, in his time in Green Bay, 4 seasons, he never had more than 38 catches, which actually came in his rookie year. So in Matt LaFleur's time, he never, I think it was 35, 36, I think it's somewhere in that regards. But either way, never had more than 38 catches. He never had more than 690 receiving yards. He never had more than 6 touchdowns, and he had never had a catch percentage above 52.4% in any given season. Those were his highs over 4 years, in different seasons. So this was not a high volume, high productivity wide receiver. And I think that matters to go over, because as we go over some of these receivers who we're thinking of how are they going to come in? This is not going to be a guy that comes in and catches, 50 passes. It doesn't have to be. It doesn't necessarily have to be. Now, MVS did get a lot of playing time. And as I mentioned, that blocking element is important to what they did, overall as an offense. But if you're looking at pure productivity, again, the threat, the idea of MVS was almost as important as his actual ability to create plays on the field. So just remember that this doesn't have to be a super high volume receiver. So who is available? And I know I've gone over some wide receivers that Green Bay could or should be interested in the past, but today I wanted to hone in at purely speed receivers, or I should maybe better say receivers who can stretch the field. And some of that's going to be speed, not all of it. But 1A on the list, to me, if you're just looking at productivity-wise, would be a Tyler Lockett. And of course, this would be via trade, but he had 7 plus 40 yarders this past season. He had 22 plus 20-yard receptions. He's a 4.40 guy. He would be perfect as a deep threat, intermediate threat. He's a great route runner. He would fit perfectly in this Matt LaFleur offense, save for the fact that he's not a great blocker on the outside. He's okay. But maybe the bigger question here is, does Seattle really have any interest in trading Tyler Lockett? Now, they could look at it and say, all right, by the time Seattle churns this roster, they're probably looking at a 2 to 3, 4-year rebuild. And by the time that happens, Tyler Lockett is past his prime. So they could say, all right, if Green Bay is willing to give us a premium pick for Tyler Lockett, we would consider that. But there's a good chance that they're not interested in doing that. But if you want to look at, again, a guy who can get deep, remember, I talked about MVS being, the leader in 40-plus yard receptions in 2020 with 6. Lockett had 7 of them just a season ago. So if you're looking for that deep guy, Lockett has everything. And he combines the 4.40 speed with great route running, great hand. Like, he has it all in that regards. Now, Russell Wilson, great deep ball thrower, but you would think that Aaron Rodgers would be able to have a great level of success with Tyler Lockett in that capacity as well. Next up, and again, a player that we've had sort of the dream scenario surrounding, DK Metcalf. Now, Metcalf's a bit more interesting, right? Only 11 plus or 11 20-plus yarders this past season and only 2 40-plus yarders. Now, he's a 4.33 40 guy, so he has the speed, he has the size, he has that athleticism. He did have 17 20-plus yarders in 2020, as well as 5 40-plus yarders in 2020, but last year was a bit of a decline. Now, that Seahawks offense was just a mess altogether. Nothing clicked, nothing gelled, but you have to believe that DK Metcalf with Aaron Rodgers would be a dream scenario for the Packers. You have to think that those numbers would increase. And again, I know that Russell Wilson's one of the best deep ball throwers in the NFL, but you got to think that as the 1A guy in DK Metcalf, the ability to stretch the field, play physical, jump ball, all of it would be a huge weapon for Aaron Rodgers. Now, again, of course, there's no guarantee that Seattle has any real interest in trading DK Metcalf. And again, even if Green Bay did, even if they did go in that direction, again, it puts all the leverage in DK Metcalf in his agent's hands, because Green Bay probably just traded a first rounder plus to acquire Metcalf's services. And of course, as we start seeing these huge contracts, Mike Williams is getting 20 mil. Christian Kirk gets a huge contract. What is DK Metcalf going to want next year when the cap goes up even more on a free agent deal from a team that just gave up massive resources to go get him, and a team that doesn't necessarily have that money or probably have the ability to put a franchise tag on him because of some of the salary cap restraints that they're going to have going into next year? So there's a lot of complications there as well. So yes, those are probably your ideal scenarios. I'm not sure either of those are actually likely scenarios. So next up, you have a guy like DeSean Jackson. Now, none of these are going to, again, be silver bullet perfect solutions, right? DeSean Jackson, however, would potentially fill that MVS style role of just having the threat of somebody who can take the top off of a defense. Now, he only had 9 plus 20 yarders, but he had 7 plus 40 yarders this past season. And remember, DeSean Jackson hardly played this past year. So that is a huge, productivity score, if you will, from DeSean Jackson, despite not playing much this past season. However, he's going to turn 36 this season. The Rams cut him mid-year last year because they basically found no use for him. He goes to the Raiders. He plays okay. Didn't have many catches outside of his explosive plays, and just seems to, by far and away, be on the decline. And of course, he's not going to be a blocker on the outside either, but he does still have the ability to take that top off the defense. When DeSean Jackson is in the game, the defense has to be like, okay, like we've got to be aware that it could be a play action shot play, that this, like, Jackson could take it, deep at any given moment. So while I don't think this is an ideal scenario, on a cheap deal, if you can't find somebody else, DeSean could still make some sense just being the guy that can stretch the field on the outside if LaFleur is legitimately telling the truth, which I guarantee he is, about wanting a need for speed on the outside and someone who can fill in and play that type of role. How about Brandon Cooks? I've talked about Cooks before in the past as well. Again, this would have to be a trade candidate, but you can't imagine the Texans have too much of a use for him over the next couple seasons. Although when you do have a young quarterback, you do want to surround him with some weapons to see what the quarterback does with those weapons. Cooks had 5 plus 40 yarders in 2021. And he had 20 plus 20 yarders in 2020, despite not always having, this past season especially, the quarterback, Davis Mills. They had a variety of different guys to be able to get him the ball down the field. You would think with a quarterback like Aaron Rodgers, that would change quite a bit. But also remember, again, Brandon Cooks is on the smaller side, and he doesn't fit that blocking mold that MVS had either. He's not a bigger receiver, which Green Bay generally likes. So yes, speed threat, deep threat, absolutely, but he doesn't check a couple of those other boxes, and you'd have to trade for him. So an option, yes. Perfect option, probably not. An interesting one, and certainly not one that still fits the speed category, but is AJ Green. Now, AJ Green had 16 plays of 20 plus yards in 2021. Most of those were contested catch, like he's not run after the catch guy, right? Those are down the field catches. He was tied for 12th last year in 20 plus yard receptions. 12th. That's pretty darn good even for a guy his age, and especially with some of the weapons that they had in Arizona already. He also had 3 plus 40 yarders. Now, as AJ Green ages, those numbers you would expect to get worse and worse. And you definitely always don't want somebody on the decline, which again, DeSean Jackson, AJ Green, by far and away on the decline. But he does still have the ability to make some of those plays down the field. Is he a perfect fit? No. Do you want that aging wide receiver? Not exactly. But he has shown a propensity to still be able to make those plays down the field. And again, at a potential cheaper price, veteran guy, maybe not the worst idea in the world, even if it's not the guy that maybe defenses are thinking, all right, he's going to be constantly stretching the field. He still has playmaking ability down the field, and that could be something that still is valuable to Green Bay, even if it's not the 4.3 40 guy that we're kind of thinking of. I've talked about Will Fuller as well. 4'3", 240, 6-foot tall guy. Fits the mold. Green Bay was interested 2 seasons ago. Matt LaFleur has familiarity with him. He should have fresh legs because he was suspended and has basically missed all of last season from injury and suspension. Like, he has very little wear and tear over the last season and a half, basically not playing at all outside of a couple games. However, he has been injury prone. He's been suspended. He hasn't really played since, mid-season 2020? And if you look at his games played over his career, he played 14 games as a rookie, and then 10 games, 7 games, 11 games, 11 games, 2 games. He has 1 season over 11 games played in a year. He has yet to play a full 16-game season, much less a 17-game season. So, yeah, you might get Will Fuller at a discounted price that based off of what he should go off of, and I still actually like the idea of Will Fuller, but you better know, or better hope that you get him for the right 5, 6, 7 games towards the end of the year when things matter, because he has not been a player who has been consistently available, and you have to sort of expect that he is going to miss time via whatever reason, and specifically probably injury, which has caused him to miss a ton of time over his career so far. And then there's 3 other guys who I want to touch base on a little bit quicker, who are speed guys that maybe either you've forgotten about or haven't heard of in a while, or maybe heard of ever. But these are 3 guys that would be probably vet minimum guys that Green Bay could at least add to the roster to add some speed, to add a potential threat. Again, all of these are shorter players, not going to be great run blockers, not going to be physical on the outside, but could bring some speed to at least be the threat of a deep ball specialist when they're in the game. The first is Marquise Goodwin, who, if you remember, ran a 4.27 40 when he was at the combine and running his 40 times. However, he's going to be 31 years old. And, going back to last season, 20 catches, 313 yards, a 15.7 yard average. Not a great average overall for more of a speed receiver. And a long of 50, which is great, but he wasn't a consistent deep ball threat. Now, again, it was the Bears, so they don't exactly have the greatest quarterbacks last year, so maybe that changes. But this would be more of just a threat on the outside, and probably is now closer to the low 4.4s, 4.5 range at this age than he is at that 4.27 speed. So not sure exactly what he would bring to the table at this point, but could be an option. Another player is John Ross. Remember, the former 9th overall pick ran a 4.22 40-yard dash. If you go back to 2019, Ross was showing some signs. He had 28 catches for 506 yards, an 18.1 yard average with 3 touchdowns. Like, if you put that into that MVS role, you're feeling, all right, pretty good. Remember, MVS never had more than 38 catches. That's a 28 catch season. Never had more than 600 some yards in a season. He had 506 that year, an 18.1 yard average, 3 touchdowns. All right, you're feeling pretty good that could be a guy that could maybe replace an MVS in that type of role. But it was basically non-existent in 2020. And then last year with the Giants, 11 catches, 224 yards, 1 touchdown. But again, a 20.4 yard average. Again, if you look at who he played with in Cincinnati in 2019 and New York in 2021, hasn't had good quarterbacks. Maybe you get lucky. Maybe a change of scenery, better quarterback changes John Ross's fortunes a bit. I wouldn't count on it. He struggled with drops a ton early in his career, has cleaned that up quite a bit over the last couple seasons. But again, more of a vet minimum type of guy that could help out if given the opportunity. And then last but not least, as another free agent, is Marvin Hall. And you might say, Andy, who the heck is Marvin Hall? He's a 4.40 guy. Go back to 2019. He spent times with the Lions and I think the Patriots for a cup of coffee. He was with the Falcons. Like he's jumped around quite a bit. He had 5 receptions in 2019. 4 of them were 20 plus yards. 3 of them were 40 plus yards. He basically came in and was literally just a deep ball specialist. And if he was on the field, you better account for him because there's a shot play coming. And if the ball goes his way, he's going to take it 40 plus yards. Only 5 catches, 4 over 20, 3 over 40. Big play guy that made an impact in 2019 in a very small sample size. He gets more playing time in 2020, had only 34 receptions, but 8 of them were over 20 yards and 4 of them were over 40 yards. So again, they used him a little bit more in a gadget type of role, but also continued to use him as a deep threat. However, go back to last season, only 1 catch for 10 yards. So he is a deep ball speed specialist. Again, 4.40 guy, hopped around the league, would be, again, a vet minimum type of guy who at least has speed, who at least could potentially add somebody to the outside that would have the threat of being able to take the top off of a defense. Again, are any of these perfect silver bullet, players who are just going to cure everything by bringing them in? Probably not. But Green Bay has a need for speed. This is the best of what's left. Whether it's via trade, whether it's via free agency, like there's just not a ton of options out there yet left for speed guys or at least playmaking guys down the field who are able to do that at any sort of consistent level. Which of course brings us to the draft. And I'm not going to go over all of these wide receivers today. We'll get into wide receivers more and draft coverage more as the rest of the month rolls along. But of course, you're going to know a lot of these names already, but Jameson Williams, 20 yards per catch on 78 receptions this past season. But of course, he's coming off an ACL injury, so that's going to be something to have to weigh out. Christian Watson, 4.36 40 guy. I guarantee you, you're going to want to go out and check everything that Ross Uglum has written and talked about with Christian Watson. Jake Morley, same thing. Like they are, incredibly high on the guy. Many people are. He's an athletic freak. But he's another option that would fit Green Bay. Alec Pierce, 4.41 140, has the size, the speed that could fit that mold as well. 2 other players, Danny Gray and Bo Melton, who are more downfield receivers. Gray was a 4.33 guy. Melton was a 4.34 guy. And then 3 other speedy guys that aren't necessarily deep downfield guys. I shouldn't say that. Tyquan Thornton, I haven't had a chance to study too much, so I won't say that about him, but he was a 4.28 guy. But Velus Jones and then Kelvin Austin, more of those shifty gadget type receivers, 4.31 and 4.32 40-yard dash guys. So definitely plenty of guys with speed in the draft, but it's trying to find the right guy that's going to fit this system, that's going to have the threat of taking the top of a defense, and that defenses have to be aware of. And remember, MVS's most catches in a season was his rookie year. He was, a 5th round pick, right? So just because Green Bay doesn't necessarily, get their speed receiver in round 1, maybe they take a guy in the 1st round, 2nd round that's more of an overall wide receiver, whether it be Olave or Pickens or whatever. Maybe they get that in the first couple rounds. Maybe they find a guy like a Tyquan Thornton, who is the speed guy that they get in the 5th round that is that threat. And again, maybe he has an MVS sort of impact later in the draft where, again, it gives the illusion of a guy that's going to take off the top off of a defense, and they have to be aware of him. Again, MVS proved that as a rookie that he could be that guy, even if it wasn't in a high volume sort of role. So all different options. Again, I can't point to any of them and tell you that these are perfect scenarios. I can't tell you any of these guys that, I think Lockett and Metcalf would be great, but again, giving up a ton of draft capital to acquire a guy like that, probably not the direction that Green Bay wants to go right now. So we shall see. And again, there's no guarantee Seattle wants to make those trades either. So we'll see what happens. But those are some guys that I've identified either via free agency, trade, or the draft that could give Green Bay that speed that Matt LaFleur is so anxiously seeking as a replacement to Marquise Valdes-Scantling. That is going to do it for me today. Thank you so much for joining me. So great to be back. Appreciate you all. I'll be right back here tomorrow with an all new episode. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.